Morning on this fine November day from Danville, Kentucky to all the center folk. Welcome to the second Coffee with Milton, that is with the 21st President of Center, uh, Dr. Moreland. How are you feeling this morning, Milton?
I'm feeling excellent. Like every Saturday morning, I got up, I shaved, I put a center tie on, and came straight into work.
So the end is in sight for this term, right?
It is, it's been an amazing semester in so many ways, mostly positive. Uh, great students who have kept us safe and healthy here. And we're rolling out of here on Tuesday evening, Wednesday morning, finishing up finals on Monday and Tuesday. We just had our last day of class. Everyone home for Thanksgiving, and hoping that faculty and staff have a little bit of a breather before we start it back up again on January 11th.
Oh my, so almost a 2 month, 7 week, 6 week vacation. It's great.
Well, vacation, yeah, exactly.
The topic of our conversation with all of you this morning is the Olin renovation in science. When Olin was built in 1986 to 88, the Shepherd faculty, the faculty Shepherd professor was Dr. Marshall Wilt in physics. He's my neighbor both in Jurassic Park and on Maple Tree Place. The Shepherd faculty overseer for this renovation is chemistry professor, Dr. Lenny de Moranville. How are you this morning, Lenny?
Good morning. I'm doing all right. I too got dressed up as I do every Saturday morning, Milton. You guys are in Old Center. For those that don't recognize it, I'm in the basement of Cooper for at least a few more weeks. We turned that into those dorm rooms into offices and classrooms while Olin was under construction. So,
Lenny, it looks that space looks so good. Don't you just want to stay there in the basement?
It is a double dorm room. I don't know that I'll ever have an office this big again. There's some nice space in here, but I am looking forward to the new office and all.
Well, do you, Lenny, and Dr. Moreland have your Coffee with Milton mug here? It's yeah.
They're here.
Okay.
Ready to go.
Ready to go. Well, let me start things off by doing a little bit of history quickly. The Olin was built between 1986 and 88, and a grant from the Olin Foundation. And Rich Morrill and Rick Nam were sort of the go-to guys on that, but Marshall Wilt was the faculty Shepherd professor. And that year, there were 87 applicants for a building. Olin usually built one building a year, and Center won. They were mightily impressed with the fact that 70% of the Center alums had donated that year. We were number one in the nation. We're still near the top, but those were the good old days. We were first. And so there was a site visit, and site visits are to verify what you've put in your proposal. And in our proposal, Marshall Wilt and others had written that, we were so crowded that at least some faculty were literally in closets for offices. So at the end of the session, I guess the chair of the Olin Foundation at the time, Lawrence Milas, said, well, let's see this closet where you have stashed faculty. So Marshall took the group over, and they really were in a sort of a closet. And he had assigned a new anthropologist, a very tall woman, Susan Bruto, to this space. And people are worried, Anyway, they opened the door and he had a key, and Susan is cramped in one dark corner, at a little desk. And Mr. Milas said, well, how are you doing? Is this okay? And she said, oh, it's fine. She said, I've gotten used to it. It's just fine. Well, of course, at that time, Rich Morrill and Rick Nam are, biting their tongue. Blood is coming out of their mouth or something. Nevertheless, Olin gave us $3 million and then added another $500,000. Interestingly enough, it's almost exactly the cost in today's dollars of the renovation, which is more than 8 million.
True that.
So let's show a picture of the building I think it's taken in 1990, but you can see. Now I want to ask the president and Lenny, how this outside, how the facade, the porch particularly strikes you. Does it call up any feelings as it did when it was built? Either one, Lanny?
Well, to me, of course, the 80s were just amazing. I mean, that was a good time. So I do like the hair fashion, beside the fact that the building itself is, it's not necessarily a bad looking building, but if you think about the style of buildings at Center College, and especially what we've been known for, the beauty and the architecture, this one may catch people, the front of that building, a little bit by surprise, frankly, standing up against, all the beautiful buildings, especially now the front of Young, and the buildings right around the green there are
It doesn't recall
built a little different quality.
In fact, there were strong opinions on both sides. Paul Kentrell claimed that it was designed by, what did he think? Let's see. It was a drunken attempt to create a ziggurat. There was a kind of informal contest on campus.
He must have really liked it.
The best view of the campus. And the winner was, well, on the roof of Roland, so that you wouldn't have to, look at all. But nevertheless, it functioned. It was desperately needed. It functioned pretty well, I guess, for a number of years. Why do we need a new one, Lanny?
Well, and so, I mean, a part of it is that we've changed in multiple ways since that time. We've grown as a college since Olin was built. There was an expansion to Young Hall that changed the functions that were things that were done in Olin, moved to those new spaces in Young. We've added new majors. So we've got interdisciplinary majors now in environmental studies and data science. Environmental studies has been sort of, they hired a scientist, I think 2 or 3 years ago now, a while ago. And they've been like begging lab space, right? So that poor scientist has been hopping from one lab to another lab every semester. And so we'll have a brand new ENS lab, environmental science lab in the building. Some of the function had gone not great, right? One of my colleagues—
When you got environmental studies lab, I toured it with you a couple of times in the last few months. Y'all gave them some amazing space. The windows in that lab are I just say, if you ever need me to move over there, I could occupy that space. That is a
Yeah, oh, there it is.
a terrific space to learn environmental science and studies, for sure.
You
Right.
can see about 270 degrees of the environment, because if you look out that right-hand window, you can see Breck and, the quad, and then you can actually see the north side on the left window. So talk about environmental studies, man, they got the environment to study in that lab, don't they?
It sure brings the outside inside, and Omni really worked hard. Our architects really worked hard. That's something that they do a lot of, bringing in outside light, and everywhere they could in the building, they were working hard to make that happen. And it's now that it's all built and we're starting to see stuff in it, it's definitely true. We get a lot of light. It's beautiful. So
When you talk about environmental studies and data science and so forth, it reminds me of something the mantra I've kind of taken up for a while in academia, as with others. It's not my mantra, but the the idea that the future of the academy is interdisciplinarity. And I think the new Olin Hall and the Knowlton Center in it well represent that idea that we're all going to have to cross over some of our old disciplinary program boundaries and work together. So having, I think that environmental studies lab right there front and center is a nice way to kind of represent. Yeah, they need their own space, but that space is created by all of the biologists and the chemists and the historians and you know, people from across the campus who work on issues around the environment and sustainability. So I was really pleased to see that space in particular coming together, as well as the beautiful new computer science and data science spaces for students to work on things together.
As faculty shepherd, Lenny, you had to be cross-disciplinary and work with the chemists and the mathematicians, computer scientists, environmentalists, physicists, and so forth. Were they like sheep and just took your direction as the shepherd and followed you, or were there differences in, say, the chalkboard faction and the whiteboard faction? I heard some nasty rumors.
I mean,
A chalkboarder or a whiteboarder?
we do mostly work well together, but chalkboards and whiteboards is an area where we ended up agreeing to disagree, and it was a little like herding cats. So
Why? What's wrong with?
I am a whiteboard person, so I'm not sure. I can give you the arguments that chalkboard people give, which is you always know when chalk's going to run out. Those markers you just can't see. They might just die in the middle of class. And then they've got those terrible fumes. Of course, as a chemist, I've burned out some of my smell receptors over time, so I don't notice it as badly. But again, the building's got classrooms and labs with whiteboards and chalkboards. There's a ton more student collaborative space, and even those collaborative spaces have chalkboards and whiteboards mixed throughout the building, so we get a little bit of both.
So are the mathematicians chalkboard or whiteboard?
Generally speaking, the mathematicians are chalkboard people.
So they don't care about the environment, but the environmental scientists would be whiteboard people?
Oh, let's not go down that road. The environment.
That's not stereotype. Come on now.
The environmental, well, it's more that the environmental arguments on markers and chalk go both ways. And so
as do most things.
there are a lot of about which is actually more environmentally friendly. If you think about all the waste with whiteboard markers and all that kind of thing, I haven't seen a good whole life cycle analysis yet. So that was not one of the sustainability initiatives we did in the building, although there are several. And so we, in that lab that we just looked at, there's all of that casework, all that cabinetry is actually out of the old Olin. So rather than throwing all the old cabinets away and getting all new, everything that could be reused was reused. And so I think there's only one lab in the building with new cabinets. Omni makes it core to what they do, that the materials they use and source, they try and make those sustainable. The light and stuff like that. All new windows in the new edition. The new edition is going to be incredibly efficient. One of the things we don't have is the old building. We could still use new windows on, but that will come somewhere down the road. And then Megan just pulled up this picture. We're standing in a second floor classroom overlooking the grand portico on the front of the building. And as part of the project, budget measures, we took out a nice paving set on top of that, so it'll just be a standard sort of rubber looking roof. And the young woman that's standing with you and I is Sydney Milliner. She's an environmental studies senior this year, who took on her senior project, is looking at and doing an analysis of whether we can put a vegetative roof on there, which we know we can put a vegetative roof on there, but what would it take? What would the materials be? What are the environmental benefits to it? What how does that make the building more sustainable? And so that's a fun example of a project that hopefully somewhere along the line we can get some funding to actually put that in and make her dream come into reality.
That might be a project for the new Center Works. Maybe we'll talk about that in a bit, down at the third floor of the hub.
When I saw that rooftop there, Lenny, when we were touring, you might recall, my first question was, can I go out on top of that and drink my morning coffee? But you said I couldn't.
And
So
unfortunately, we talked about that, and to do that would involve some pretty different structural supports, and so we couldn't make it a porch for sitting. But it would have been.
well, I'll be okay. I'll be okay. I'll find another place to sit on campus and drink my
It
morning
would
coffee.
be verboten, like some other things on campus, such as running around the flame without a lot of clothes on. And there is also a myth that very serious physics students, this gets us to the pendulum, have a certain ritual with the pendulum. Is there any truth to that, Lenny?
I would say I have seen evidence of it during senior week. There are often bare footprints on the pendulum, and the pendulum has stopped moving.
Ah.
And so it seems like that is actually a true tradition. And this was another place where initially we didn't know how the pendulum was going to be able to stay in the building, but Omni saw it, realized what an important feature it was, and rather than take it out of the building, they've really made it a highlight. So this is a picture we're looking at, a rendering of the new stair tower in the rear. So this is Walnut Street. And so now the pendulum is up high enough that as you're driving by at night on Walnut, you should be able to see that pendulum swinging. And so that's really exciting because it's really becoming a showpiece of the building, whereas it was sort of buried before. They've made it the highlight of the building.
How long does it take the pendulum to inscribe a circle?
If I remember correctly, it's 24 hours, but I'm...
Aha. Having lived next door to Marshall Wilt, I can correct you. 24 hours at the South and North Pole. It takes ours 33.
Okay.
And it goes, let's see, clockwise, like water goes down the drain of a bathtub, but in the Southern Hemisphere, it would go counterclockwise. I think I have that right.
I think that's...
And it's, I guess Marshall was particularly interested in this. There's one at the UN building and in the cathedral in Leningrad and so forth. But it's a wonderful kind of teaching device for physics. And I'm in physics 001 right now, living next door to Marshall.
It's really interesting.
Now, I saw Sydney, but I thought that sciences, at least when I came back in '71, our science program was mostly men teaching men. So you allow women in take science and certainly not to teach, like Dotsie. Dotsie, I think, probably the only woman in Division III. A lot of women who teach it and take it, Lenny?
Yeah, in fact, several of my colleagues are my chemistry colleagues are on here this morning. And so chemistry, for instance, on the faculty side is roughly as many women as it is men now. And we've got plenty of women majors. And in fact, an alum that's on here, CC Volbrecht, was a student of mine several years ago, and she's now at University of Wisconsin-Madison. So hi, CC. But that's sort of a fun story. She was in a first-year class, and Steve Hoffman of the Norton Center asked me if I'd be interested in bringing a class to see Dr. Kaboom. He takes on the facade of a German scientist and puts on this amazing demo show. And so my class was at 8 a.m., so it was too early for the student matinee. But we walked over to the Norton Center and we spent a day listening to him talk about why science outreach is important. And CC, I had the students do a reflection paper, and CC in hers mentioned I wish there was a club at Center like I had in high school where we went in and talked about science to middle school girls. We know that middle school is a place where we lose women out of the STEM pipeline. And I wrote this offhand comment that just said, you can do that. Let me know if you want help. And she came back and started a club. And so since then, Center women have been going into our local middle schools each week with the Girls in Engineering, Math and Science Club, GEMS, and not this semester, they've been doing some take-home kits. But up until this year in COVID, they've been going in and reaching out to our local middle school girls. And so that's a way that we're not only letting them in, but they're making a big difference in our campus and in our community.
It's a great story. It's interesting to me just looking at overall data on students coming to college, right? More women are going to college than men. And of course, having a lot of diversity in our faculty is a big priority here. And it is wonderful to see this facility being used by everybody, but it's a great training ground for the future of science. By the way, for alumni watching, I'm happy to report that students at Center College still have to take 2 science classes. So everybody in the curriculum is busy with science. And as a humanist, you know, and an archaeologist, I think it's thrilling to be at a place where science occupies a big part of the curriculum for everybody. But my sense is that probably up to half of our students come here to study in some area of the sciences. Where do they end up in their careers, and do they all go to med school? So I'll jump in with the question here, Milton, to Lenny. But it seems to me that when I hear about alumni, a lot of them are in research and a lot of them go straight into careers. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, and I mean, it varies from year, and I don't have the official stats. We have a fair number that go to professional schools, right? Medicine or other health or vet or those sorts of things. We've got a fair amount every year that go on to graduate school, like CC that I mentioned, and other students that I've had. And then we do have a fair number that go into industry right away. And in fact, one of the fun stories, another student that I had wrote me that one of the courses that gets taught in Olin and will be taught in the new Olin space is called instrumental analysis, and sort of the critical course for a chemist that's going out into the world to be in industry. And that course teaches them how to do the basic chemical analysis that a technician would do out in industry. And she wrote me and said, I just got a job. She works at a flavor company in Cincinnati. I just got a job because I touched the GC, right? Like I used the GC in your class. And because I'd actually used it, they told me they hired me. And so, I mean, we're not about job training here, right? But it's important that folks go off and get jobs. And so it's nice when those two things intersect. And so that's really kind of an exciting opportunity that we have. And we'll have almost as good a space as environmental science for that class. We get an old Center and old Carnegie in the quad from that lab, and it looks gorgeous too. So
Let's talk about the renovation, and let's do a little ancestry.com. I would say two of the ancestors of the Knowlton grant from the foundation would be Eric Mount and Wijdan Dreset. I think Wijdan may be on. Eric was probably the first contact for Mr. Knowlton. He was at Shaker Village and wanted to get married, and he called this Presbyterian college to find a Presbyterian minister to marry him, and came over and got to know Eric, and he was married in the old chapel that was up on the second floor of the old Sutcliffe. Wijdan graduated in '98. She received the Gavin Wiseman Valedictorian Award, and she became a lawyer. and at Katz Tiller, and her office was apparently right down the hall from a man named Bob Pitcairn, who was on the foundation. Apparently, for the last 18 years, at every meeting, Wijdan has sat next to Mr. Pitcairn and sung sotto voce, "Sent her dear, sent her dear, we offer thee," like whatever. So she totally co-opted him, and he has been, I think, important in the foundation. They had been supporting Center for a few years with scholarship money. Most of their buildings had been in Ohio. So it was, again, a kind of a coup, I think, when we got the rather large grant. And so thank you, Eric and Wijdan, and certainly John Rouse, uh, an Ohioan. That didn't hurt.
Definitely.
And we can now make the campus look a little more together. Before, the Olin building was like one of those Sesame Street things. Which of these things doesn't belong? You have like four apples and a kumquat or something. Well, and let's show it. There's a slide. This is the what it looks like right now, but it's changing every day. But there's a slide that shows a comparison of campus windows and columns that Omni, the architectural firm, did. I don't know if we can put that up, maybe the windows first, which is to say they knew the environment. You can see perhaps on the left the Breckenridge windows and the Young windows on the right. And there is some realization that this building is in a place with other buildings, okay? And so when you come to campus and look at it, you'll see how carefully they haven't simply duplicated. That would be boring. These are the columns. Now, every student in the past 40 years has taken a year-long course in humanities and started by studying Greek architecture, and they would immediately say, aha, all of the columns here are Doric, not Corinthian or something else. And that's because Doric is the most solid, the most lasting, stable, kind of chunky soup rather than kind of filigree. Well, the fact that Omni cared so much about the context is important. And I think when we see the final building, and I'll set this as a task for everyone who comes. Look at Old Center, particularly the columns, and then look at the columns on Olin, the renovated Olin, and you see how clever Omni has been. You talked about space for research. A few years ago, Center started the Center Commitment, guaranteeing every student 4 years, a degree and study abroad. But it was added a couple years ago, I think, maybe 3 or 4, that the Center Commitment also says that you get to either do an internship or research with faculty during your stay at Center. Are there particular spaces in the renovation for collaborative research with faculty, Lenny?
Yeah, so there's a renovated space for chemistry. There's new space for environmental studies. There's new space for physics, which are the lab sciences. Computer science, data science also have some research space, and so there's definitely that in there. And it's such a critical of an experience. Right? So PC on here, she did undergraduate research. I see Grace Ann Martin, and she was one of my research students. My first research student, Alex Combs Brudar, she's now also in a PhD program, and she came in thinking she was going to be a med student or be a physician. My colleague Joe Workman, if he's on here, would correct me on that one. And so, but after doing research, she just fell in love with lab work. And so she's doing amazing things. She's got a great postdoc here in about 6 months. And so That's just so critical at getting people to sort of experience what it is to be a scientist. It changes the way that it works. And, you know, that's something that we continue to try and support here. And it's an area that we're growing and growth. I don't know if Milton has some thoughts on that.
Milton,
Which Milton?
Well,
Holy cow, we had a double Milton moment there. Yes,
yeah.
I have some
Why don't
thoughts, Milton, but I bet Milton has some thoughts as well.
this leads
But-
into Center Works, which is in a sense collaborative, not only with faculty, but with the town. What is that about, Milton Le Premier?
You know, Milton, I'm glad of a couple things that you brought up. The Knowlton Foundation is a fantastic group, and I've been honored to meet with them. Unfortunately, just virtually at this point, but we hope that they'll all be here for the opening of the building in a couple months. So, but that foundation, yeah, like you say, not only has supported student access to Center through scholarships, which is terrific, and a lot of students from Southern Ohio, Cincinnati area coming to Center with some aid there from the foundation, but love the fact that they got involved in this project in a big way. And so when you walk into the building, we're going to try to recognize that incredible gift and contribution to the college. I think the thing about walking into the building also fits with what you're talking about in terms of the interaction. There's a lot of space for people to actually sit together and think together. It looks a little bit like what you'd hope a library would look like, right? Big tables, lots of chairs. So it's not the narrow hallways of the old Olin. It's these nice sitting areas, nice study areas, collaborative areas, a lot of windows like we talked about. So that was one of the first things that struck me is like, holy cow, look at the breadth here of these spaces. But yeah, CenterWorks is a great example. The Center Learning Commons is going to open up in the library in January is another example of this kind of sense of we need to come together, we need to work together, and we need to support each other in ways that kind of support the whole student, and as faculty and staff, also some great opportunities to be involved in the community. CenterWorks in particular, open it up on the 3rd floor of the Hub building. I'm sure we're going to have a coffee with the Miltons up there at the Hub and talk with the Margitas and others who involved in CenterWorks. But you know, students this summer who were already involved with CenterWorks were talking about access to food and housing, working with different corporations and nonprofits in Danville, the Bluegrass, Central Kentucky, Lexington, Louisville, to drive forward good in our community, to look at equity and issues of justice. So CenterWorks is a cool project, and I think like walking into Olin, like walking into the library, and now the 3rd floor, these are spaces that model and provide access to what the future is, which is interdisciplinarity, people working together on entrenched, sticky problems, and figuring out creative and innovative ways. So scientists and humanists, social scientists and artists coming together to help each other think about the future. So I think in so many ways, and I say this not only because I'm the president of this wonderful college, but I truly believe this. What we're doing here is hope for the future. I mean, it is really like bringing scholars, bringing dedicated people together and students, and crafting some incredible projects. I will say, Lenny, and you may have specific examples you want to call out. Our scientists are cutting edge, first rate, world-class scholars who are pulling a lot of grants into Center College. And many of you included, are really high level publishing scholars in your fields. And it's amazing that students, 18-year-old first year student, can walk in and work in your lab. We don't have labs taught by graduate students here, right? And as a scholar myself, it was always a pleasure to work with 18, 19-year-olds and to bring them into my work. I think people who come to teach at Center, that's kind of what drives us, right?
I agree. I think that's exactly, I mean, that's why I came here. That I wouldn't be at a place like Center. I wouldn't be at Center if that wasn't the driving motivation. It's great to do science. I enjoy doing it, but it's really that interaction with students that makes it what it is and makes it worth getting up on a Saturday morning to come in and do it. I think she's on the call. I'm gonna quote her, and I don't know that she's gonna do this, but one of my colleagues, we were talking about the new Olin and Milton Center, and Carrie Young said that, Olin Hall and the Milton Center are a house, but it's the students and the faculty that make it a home. And I think that's completely true, right? It's those interactions that just keep us going, that drive us. And it's so much fun when you make progress on one of those sticky problems, one of those sticky issues with one of those students, right? And seeing the world in a different way. And I personally spend a lot of time working with non-science majors, which is also a ton of fun, and talking about science. I'm doing one of our new Doctrina Lux Mentis courses, which is the foundational course for our new Gen Ed, with first year students. I'm doing one that's a cross collaboration with me and Jen Goff in theater. And so we're doing science on stage, and we're just looking forward to exploring some of the issues in life and society from a science perspective and from a theater perspective, and just looking at how we look at the world in two different ways. And I think that's part of what we do well here.
That is beautiful.
The new
Milton,
will make it.
I wanted to ask you a question, Milton Riegelman.
Okay.
I have listened to a lot of alumni stories in my first 5 months here, and I'm always surprised, but not really, knowing you, but there's a lot of science majors who actually graduated, alumni, who claim you, Milton Riegelman, I don't think you're a scientist, but who claim you as one of their mentors. So as a literature professor, what did you appreciate about teaching and working with our science majors over your years at the college?
Some of the best students I've ever taught, even in upper level English classes, have been science majors. And a few weeks ago, I was thinking about this in another context. And, every year there's some students who just stand out and you never forget them. And a lot of those were women, and there weren't a lot of women in chemistry and physics at the time, but who were so multi-talented, and they would take a course in Henry James or something. With the renovation in Olin, though, won't it now be possible not only, Lenny, for you to go over to the Norton Center with Jen Goff, but for instance, for the physicists in the basement to actually get to the second floor and talk to the chemists? Now, wasn't it sort of impossible to get from...
That's a lot to ask. That's a lot to ask.
Now, how did you do that, Lenny, in the old building?
In the old building, there wasn't a way to do that, right? If you wanted to get to the basement, you either went through the foyer and down the pendulum stairs, or you went outside the building and down this fire escape cement. It was I never went down there.
Even
Uh,
in the snow.
get to the second floor. In fact, I had faculty that had been on campus there was a faculty member one of my first years here that was coming to my office for a meeting, and they asked where my office was, and I told them the second floor of Olin, and they said, that's impossible. Olin doesn't have a second floor. And I reassured them that I climbed a set of steps every day because it was these sort of exterior staircases that you went underneath an exit sign from the Pendulum foyer up to the second floor. Or you could go outside. And so, yeah, it will definitely be nice. Both the front entrance and the back entrance now run from the basement to the second floor. And
That's
so,
what that says, exit, platform 9.5, like in,
yes, yeah, exactly.
Well, gosh, Omni put together I think, a wonderful view of what it's gonna be like to actually walk into the finished building and walk through it. It's just dazzling. I don't know how they come up with this, but want to turn to that and then maybe ask the president to talk about the future of not only science, but of the center graduate in the next several years. So let's show the film. I think I can't wait to see it again. I previewed it last week.
That is terrific. I love the entry shots there where you're walking into the building. And as we talked about, the future of all our work is collaboration, interdisciplinarity, kind of a sense of space that can make that happen there, Lenny. That's striking to me. So nicely done on working and shepherding this project. Lenny, when you think about, I'm going to ask you one last thing before we let you go, and then I'll make a couple quick closing remarks. But we're firing back up the Center STEM Catalyst and Science Fellows program and so forth. It feels like a great moment if friends of the college, alumni, and others are thinking about, what can I do to help support the future of Center College? Of course, we've got great building projects going on, a lot of things you can put your name on, frankly, spoken like a good president, right? But what about supporting students here? What are you looking forward to in terms of that faculty-student opportunity?
So, I mean, I think there's definitely some opportunities still left in the building, right, to improve structure. And so I don't want to completely ignore that. And that's also where my head's been a lot for the past year or two. But you know, one of the things that we really could use support with is that summer research experience, right? That part of doing this is in order to increase access, right? In order to increase diversity in the STEM fields in general, we need to be able to pay our students well over the summer. And frankly, my faculty colleagues would probably recommend that I say and pay faculty reasonable for doing that as well. And we do a good job, right? I don't want to say that we don't do a good job, but if I had more money to support more students, I could have more people in my lab over the summer, and it would look like a bigger group. You'd get more energy. We'd make more use of those collaborative spaces. And so support for students to do summer research, support for students to travel to conferences. We've got a fairly limited amount of money for that. And that's an important thing, right? To go out and Center's one place, but man, you get out to a science conference and you get to see what other people are doing. And you're right, we do some amazing things here, but you know, there are just tools and things that aren't going to be accessible here at Center. And there are things that we're 10 chemists, we're 4 physicists, we're 4 computer scientists. And I'm forgetting I forget exactly how many mathematicians we have, but don't want to leave them out. We're 1 environmental scientist, right? Science is bigger than that, right? The research opportunities we have and the research interests we have are wonderful, but there's a whole world out there that we don't even touch. And you walk into one of these giant conferences and see the breadth of things. And so I think it would be great to be able to support that even more.
It's incredible that our undergraduate students go to these conferences, present, and often get confused by those listening, thinking that must be a graduate student. That person must be working on a PhD. That's the type of dedicated, educational high touch you get at a place like Center, and it's irreplaceable in so many ways in terms of a training ground. But thanks for joining us in our development effort this morning, Lenny. You get some extra points from Kelly Neshi, our VP for development. But no, it is, we have such dedicated alumni that it's hard sometimes to say, hey, there's some areas alumni are already doing a lot, but I think when you look in the sciences, it's like there's some really amazing things that people could put their name on or just help out, and they would have a huge lasting impact for our students here. I am thrilled to have this conversation. It went really well, Milton, despite me interjecting my attempts at humor. So thank you, Professor Riegelman, for guiding us. Thank you, Lenny, for giving us real insight. I have finished my coffee. I hope you have done the same. I will say that we are thrilled to be closing out the fall semester here on really an exceptionally high note, considering that we've been doing this during a world pandemic. And the tribute goes to our students. The 1,350 students we have with us this semester have been doing an incredible job of driving this place forward and driving each other forward during this pandemic, and our faculty and staff. What a crew. What a time to come in as the president of Center College. But frankly, it gave me a great opportunity to meet people in a kind of a strange way, but in a way where we're all working together in a crisis moment. And we will never forget this year. Well, appreciate everybody joining us. This has been a lot of fun. And next month, we're going to continue. I think we're going to set up over at the Craik House. And Dina and I and Blue will talk a little bit about the incredible renovations that have been going on over there for the last 5 months. We've kind of upgraded a little plumbing and wiring and floors and ceilings, but also made a few changes in the historic, beautiful Craik House, President's Home. So we want to take you on a tour and talk about how excited we are to have all of you into the Craik House as soon as we can do that with a little bit of health and safety. All right, that's it for me. Milton, any closing words there? Awesome. Thank you, my friends.
Thank you.
Have a great Saturday.